This is a More Than Just Podcast production.
Welcome to this podcast, Season 5, Episode 4. My name is Tim Mitra. I'm in Toronto, Ontario, and I'm joined once again by Jonathan Kuline in Mississauga, Ontario.
Hello there, kids.
And I'm also joined by Jaime Lopez Jr. in Seattle, Washington.
How's it going?
And this may, in fact, be the last episode of Sparkcast because, you know, there's going to be a giant rivalry going on. I don't know if these two guys are going to be speaking to each other after a couple of weeks. Or after the weekend's over. There's only like 2 games or something like that.
It's 3 games, Friday, Saturday, and possibly Sunday, depending on how things go. But yes, the Mariners of Seattle and the Blue Jays of Toronto are headed to the playoffs. And Jaime, have you got a bet? Have we got a bet going?
Oh, are we going to do one of those like mayors of the cities kind of bets?
I feel like that's probably appropriate, but I don't know. What's the nerdy sci-fi equivalent of that kind of bet? I can't just like send you like maple syrup in exchange for I don't know. What do you guys have? Rain?
Yeah, the thing that traditionally gets done for the mayor thing, and I've got some vague ideas that are like kind of nutty for sci-fi twists. So normally the mayor will do like salmon or smoked salmon or something that travels pretty easily because salmon's pretty big here in the Pacific Northwest. I don't know that that could work okay. I have my doubts about getting that through customs. So the next thing that comes to mind is like, I wonder if I could get like a celebrity, what is it? Is it Cameo, that app that they do where like,
there you go.
Get somebody from sci-fi from this region, so some that come to mind, or like Chris Pratt or something like. I don't know the list. I've not looked at the list, but like find a Pacific Northwest Seattle
Scully and Mulder,
kind of sci-fi person and be like, okay, here you go, you win, Jonathan. Blah blah. You know, we'll come up with a script, right, and pay the bucks.
This is where I point out that Lexa Doig is from Toronto.
Oh yeah, there you go. There you go. That is keep your eye on the prize for this weekend. Is how that's going to work out.
Never has a man rooted so hard for the Mariners in all his life.
It's one of those things where it's kind of like, I don't need the Mariners to win, I need the Blue Jays to lose. It's totally okay. With nutty things happening in the quest here, so that's a really good one. Yeah, no idea if any of these people are on Cameo, but we'll find something.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, with that out of the way, we'll start off with some fact check. I'm going to say Yvonne Strahovski plays Serena Waterford on The Handmaid's Tale, and I can never remember her name, but I remember her from, what was that show she was on, which was like a guy from an electronics store, was like when she was a CIA agent or something like that.
Is that Chuck?
Show?
Mm-hmm,
Chuck,
mm-hmm.
Yeah. She was the FBI/CIA secret agent in that show. And Bella Ramsey plays Lady Ileana Mormont on the Game of Thrones, and she is going to be the co-star of Last of Us, which we talked about last week. And Ibn Moss Barak is in both The Bear, Andor, and The Punisher. Apparently, I haven't seen The Punisher yet, so I don't know him from that, but he's the guy that played, was the character's name Skeeve or something like that in Andor? He's the one that keeps doubting...
Skeen with an N.
Skeen. Yeah, he's the one that keeps doubting Cassian Andor. But he's apparently from sort of the New England area, which is why he fits into The Bear so well. So that's that for the fact check. So we'll jump into the headlines, and Jonathan's going to go first.
Yeah, so we'll start with some Trek news this week. The news came from our friends over at Variety magazine that the 4th Star Trek film, which has been sort of talked about off and on, but had always been on the schedule to appear in theaters next year, has officially been bumped. So this isn't a huge surprise given the timing. It doesn't sound like they really got their act together to get another of the J.J. Abrams, Chris Pine, Zach Quinto, Zoe Saldana, Carl Urban, John Cho, Simon Pegg, etc. franchise back in action that soon. They were supposed to be in theaters on December 22nd, 2023. That seemed wildly optimistic considering it doesn't sound like they've even, settled on a script and all that kind of stuff. So I guess it's not that wildly surprising, but it does, again, add to the sort of limbo of will they, won't they, are they going to, aren't they going to. Again, they announced that they were going to do this movie. They announced that, Matt Shackman was supposed to be the director, and then he left. And so, yeah, it's kind of in limbo. So no idea when we're going to see more Star Trek in the movie theater. Begging the question, do you guys care
About?
seeing that version of Star Trek ever again, and or in the theater ever again?
Seeing it, yeah. Whether it's in the theater or not, I don't think it matters. But yeah, I like that cast.
Yeah, I think
Mind you, they're running out of stars, though, right?
Yeah, that is true. And in terms of care, I think I care, but not like to the point where I'm super devastated that this thing that seemed like it was going to happen for a while, and then we kind of forgot about it because it wasn't, and then it was coming back for a minute, and then now it's not. I think I will definitely enjoy it when it becomes available. I think I care about it from the sort of angle that Tim was talking about. Like I like the cast, but it isn't something that I am fully invested in, and I don't think that's a discredit to them. It's more like that filled a particular spot, really difficult time for Star Trek fans where there wasn't new Trek. And now we are, flush with Trek, where it feels like, oh, that's okay. We'll just wait it out. We've got other shows and other things to watch, right? Doesn't feel as desperate as it was in the 2009 era where we really needed something new.
Well, I think from my perspective, I think it's a nice bonus, but I must admit, after the last of those films, I guess it was Star Trek Beyond, it was a fine, it was a bag of popcorn movie, but it wasn't a Star Trek. Like, it didn't feel very Star Trek-y, and yeah. So I'm not clamoring. The only one that really has intrigued me over the last little while, and all these rumors and what they're going to do, was when they were talking about Quentin Tarantino doing a Star Trek movie. That was like, okay, I want to see that.
Yeah, I think that movie definitely jumped a shark. Like the only thing missing from that motorcycle scene was a shark, right?
Yeah, it kind of was, and that's why I kind of feel like maybe it's best that...
Yeah, I'd forgotten about that movie now that you mention it, but yeah.
If they told me they were going to do a, all the Star Treks mashup time adventure mixed cast kind of deal in the theaters, I'd be way more excited than I am about a fourth J.J. Abrams verse one, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they've done so much good work with the latest bunch of TV shows that it kind of eclipses anything they could do in the theaters, right?
Yeah.
Like you want to see the other casts maybe in a movie as opposed to, the other TV casts in a movie. Like, we've had the Next Generation, we've had the original series, right? We've never had a DS9 movie, right? We've never had a Voy movie. Although I think Catherine Janeway was in one of the movies, wasn't she?
Yeah, she had a cameo in the last movie, Nemesis.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, and then of course there's the real versions of the Lower Decks crew, right? They could do something, right?
Yeah. Although, is there much left of the Star Trek? You're talking original series, or
no, the Lower Decks folks.
Oh, the Lower Decks. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Like, because they could all, the guy who plays Rutherford could wear heels, but to make himself taller. But
just like to say for the record, as we've been talking, I just took a quick look on Cameo. Tawny Newsome is on there.
What do you mean?
Well, our Cameo bet potentially. Doug Jones is on there. Right. Emily Coots is on there. Tawny Newsome's on there. We get some good stuff going here.
What are you talking about? Okay, you're back to the baseball game. Okay, cool.
Circling back around.
Yeah, we'll do what we can there. The ideal one is if somebody's like from this, our respective areas. Really, but if we really can't find anybody who sort of fits, then it's like, okay, well, then we'll find a sci-fi related one there. So, like you said, like Tawny Newsome or Doug Jones doing some stuff would be great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, technically, Carl Urban and Jack Quaid as well, right?
Yeah, we'll see what we can
hang around here. Who hangs around Seattle these days? I don't know.
It's one of those things where, maybe you do a connection sort of thing. So, like, I don't know where she's from, but one of her first major characters is in Seattle. That would be Jessica Alba from the Dark Angel.
Dark Angel, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So
you're going to go with Fantastic Four or something like that.
it's one of those things where I'm just going to have to like I literally don't know. I have to look at the list of folks who are on Cameo and then start doing Wikipedia checks to see like who's from the Seattle area. Unless somebody I'm like, oh, like I knew Chris Pratt is from this region. I know that Anna Faris is from this region. I got to see if she's been in any sci-fi stuff though. Borderline stuff like Scary Movie and other things that might count in the culture part.
Yep.
All right, next thing on our list for headlines is we got the first more robust trailer for Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. The first one was a beautiful trailer, but it was very much about these sort of random scenes, and it was really kind of hard to piece together much beyond the sort of, what does this visual potentially mean? What does this potential visually mean? This trailer gave us a lot more to sink our teeth into. There's some clear moments in this trailer where you're like, oh, that's that, this is that, that is this. And if you're familiar with the sort of Black Panther lore, there's a lot to be gleaned from all this stuff. So before we get into the potential spoiler of it all, I guess I want to get your impressions, gentlemen, on this new trailer.
Looks cool. Looks like they're, answering at least a little bit of some of the stuff we were wondering, like, what's happening with the T'Challa character given Chadwick Boseman's, demise and how they're going to approach that. Are we going to go through some of the other things we saw there, or just like because I didn't go through any of those like scene by scenes, but we see more of Atlantis and Namor. We see a pretty good hint of who we think, spoilers, new Black Panther, the new person taking on the mantle. We see what I presume to be the Ironheart crossover or introduction.
Yep.
Yeah, these are cool things, and it's setting up some nice stuff.
Do you feel like so I agree with you, Jaime. I think those are two of the biggest sort of takeaways from this trailer. We do get a first look at the Ironheart in the armor, and then we do get our first look at what seems to be the new Black Panther, and it's pretty clear when you look at it what you're looking at. So if you wanted to be surprised with how that plays out, this trailer would effectively end that. Obviously there's still the possibility of who is that under the costume, although I think that is pretty clear too, based on a couple of different factors. But do you feel like you would have liked to have come into it with even less knowledge, where that was sort of in dispute, or do you feel like that was a foregone conclusion anyways?
I feel like I kind of guessed who would probably take over the mantle of Black Panther. Like if you just asked me prior to realizing Chadwick Boseman would die, you say, okay, the character's got to be gone. Something bad happened. Who takes over as the next one, right? I probably would have guessed who it appears to be, and you never know with these kind of trailers. Maybe they're really pulling one, fast one over on us, and maybe I'm assuming too much here. So I maybe am too deep into the if you're like the marketers, you're like, bro, we got to show Black Panther. We can't have this Wakanda Forever thing that does not have a Black Panther. So did they have to show us as much as they did? That's a different argument. But I think they kind of had no choice but to show us that, yes, this movie will in fact have a Black Panther.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. What about Rocket Boot Boy?
Girl.
What do you guys think of that character? Is it Rocket Boot Girl?
Girl. Mm-hmm. That's Riri Williams. That's Ironheart. She's a character that has become quite popular in the comics that they're introducing to the MCU here. Yeah, I mean,
good person, bad person. What's the deal?
No, she's on the side of light. She's somebody who in the comic books was sort of this is not a spoiler, but Tony Stark is not dead in the comic books because comic book characters never die for very long, and
right.
So she is somebody who sort of hero worshipped him and then developed her own sort of pseudo armor and sort of takes up the mantle, as it were. And I think that's how they're kind of using her here, is she's sort of the next generation of Iron person.
But did was that person wearing like Tony Stark type armor? Because I didn't really get that impression. I just saw they had fire rocket boots.
Yeah, no, there's a full set of armor, and it is in fact gold and red. So you can certainly look at it and say it, it's very derivative, but she's kind of meant to be as smart in her own way as Tony is, and it's not like she steals his old armor and does anything with that. She doesn't steal his armor. She actually just creates her own. So how that story will play out, how they'll put some wrinkles on it in the MCU, who knows? But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what else they sort of pull from the comics for that. And then, yeah, I mean, again, I guess we'll get into, speculation corner here a little bit, but the Black Panther that we see quite visibly on the screen is clearly female. And in conjunction with the movie poster that came out this week that conspicuously has Letitia Wright as the center most prominent character, I think a lot of people are putting 2 and 2 together and getting 4. But as Jaime points out, these things can be red herringy sometimes. They'll set you up that, oh, it's going to be this person, but oh, what a twist, it's this person. They can always do that kind of stuff. To me, that kind of makes the most sense. She was very likable in the first movie and in the Avengers movies. Whether or not, she has the gravitas to carry a whole franchise going forward, I'm not sure, but I think we're going to find out.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see where they go with the Ironheart character, just to follow up a little bit on that, because from what we see here, the Ironheart suit is, no knock on it, but it's not the nanobots, it just comes out of my chest sort of cool thing that Tony Stark had from Mark, bazillion that he had by that point. It's closer to like a Mark 1 or like a Obadiah Stane's armor from the original Iron Man movie, which kind of feels like a nice thing to show that like what you might be able to build from watching YouTube videos of like, I think I figured out how Iron Man's armor works kind of thing that people would do in real world. And then, future iterations if she gets friendly with the Wakandans who have a lot of high-tech technology to carry on and refine that armor for like the TV show.
Yeah, I believe Ironheart was slated to be a Disney Plus series. So I think that the idea is that she will get a grand entrance here, and then that story for her will pick up next year or the year after on Disney Plus. So I think there's already big plans for her, and especially in a MCU that has been red flagged by a number of people for being a little too Caucasian and a little too male. I think they need every chance they can to start introducing more characters of color and more women. So that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Are you more or less or the same amount of hyped for this, having seen this? I mean, like I said, the first trailer was beautiful. It was really, really, the music, the way that the cuts were done. It was a really good trailer. One of the nicest I think I've ever seen. It's just a matter of from there, this one is a little more, plot forward, a little more, in the weeds for the story as opposed to the last one. So.
Yeah, I'm still hyped for this movie. I can't believe we made it all this way without talking about Namor's comic accurate little wings, his little foot wings.
Oh, I know.
That's who I was talking about.
Oh, is that what you meant? I'm sorry, I didn't.
The flying sort of person thing that just sort of went is that sort of thing.
Oh, I got you. I got that. That went past me because. So you meant without the use of rocket boots and stuff, because that's where I got kind of lost.
Like
I thought you were talking about Ironheart.
They didn't have any costume per se, but they had like little powered boots of some type, right?
No, that's actually so. Namor is a mutant in the vein of the X-Men, and his mutation is that he has this ability that others of his kind do not have, and that includes those little weird wings on his heels that help him fly.
Okay.
And I did see an interview with someone affiliated with the movie, and they have confirmed that he is in fact a mutant. That he is, as they've already dropped the idea of that on the Ms. Marvel show that she is also a mutant. They've apparently confirmed that he will be a mutant character. Yeah, I thought when you said rocket boots, you were talking about Ironheart, because she does have sort of rocket boots, but then the whole suit of armor and everything.
Mm-hmm. No, it's the flying person kind of zipping through the trailer.
Yeah.
One point.
I'll be curious to hear somebody actually say, and I don't think I've heard it yet, Namor, no more. Nemo Mamor. One of those ones that I've been reading for 40 years, but don't think I've ever heard someone say out loud who actually is authorized to say that. Should have asked Stan. I talked to Stan. I should have asked him.
So what's happening in the Spawn world? Yeah,
so we had talked about the fact that there was going to be a Spawn movie again, I think in an episode way back. Todd McFarlane has been talking about wanting to bring the character back into live action. And there was talk for a while there that he was gonna write the script and he was gonna direct it, and it might be a little sort of Blumhouse was involved. It was going to be a little sort of edgy Blumhousey type of smaller budget picture, a little horror-y, and that kind of went out the window this week. So we got news that Scott Silver, Malcolm Spellman, and Matt Mixon are all going to collaborate on writing a new script for the film. And, those may not be names that but when I tell you what they've worked on, you'll say, oh. So Scott Silver wrote Academy Award-winning The Joker. Malcolm Spellman wrote Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And Matt Mixon, sorry, I've lost Matt Mixon's CV here. He did a very popular music doc a few years ago called Yesterday Was Everything that everyone was kind of gushing over. And so all of them are going to start sort of collaborating on this, which prompted McFarlane to put out this week. He sort of said, I've now got 3 world-class scriptwriters working on the script for this. I don't know if I'm the right person to direct this anymore. We might have to go looking for an A-list director to do this. And Jamie Foxx is still attached to it as the potential star to play Spawn. So this has gone from a little sort of could be interesting horror-y kind of thing for Blumhouse to this could be a potentially bigger budget, bigger attention, high profile kind of comic movie, which is interesting.
Well, we already had 2 Spawn movies, right?
I think there was one theatrical movie and then there was an amazing HBO cartoon series.
That's kind of what comes to my mind.
Yeah, you and I saw Spawn in the theater, as I recall, Tim, and at the old what was that one at Yonge Street?
Oh,
the one at Yonge and Bloor.
Uptown?
The Uptown, the one that used to be down in the basement with the huge sound. I remember seeing it there with you.
It was Yonge and Bloor, you said? Yeah, Uptown.
Yeah.
It's gone now. It's a condo or something like that now, right?
Everything's a condo in Toronto now. But yeah, it's it had a moment. It's not a movie that's held up particularly well. It was kind of a tweener. It was it kind of was a little too early on the CGI. It had some CGI. It was not the greatest CGI. It just kind of missed by a few years being something even more memorable, I think. But now that they can do more, and because there's kind of this culture that's embraced this kind of story, I think it could be really good.
Yeah, if anything's calling out for a special edition, it is the CGI from the Spawn movie, because it's got some stuff that does hold up pretty well, but there is some CGI, like Malbosia in particular, who didn't really hold up at that time in the 90s and is way rougher here in 2022. So I think somebody take another crack at it with modern filmmaking techniques is cinematography, etc. is a pretty interesting one. Hope this gets off the ground.
Yeah, and I was okay with the movie at the time. You're right, it was a little limited, but I loved the adaptation they did for HBO. That was such a dark and weird and just odd series, and went to some of the places that the comic does, which is to say it was really quite dark at times, violent and just dark sense of humor. And yeah, it was interesting to see them adapt that quite faithfully from the comic. I wonder what they've got in mind for this, and I guess we'll find out.
I guess we will.
And the last thing I've got this week was one that it made me smile. So there has been speculation for a very, 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 very long time that a member of the Scooby-Doo gang has been queer. And it's never been confirmed because it's a kid's cartoon. And, in a lot of cases, they just aren't overt about those kind of things. They want to sort of, let people draw their own conclusions. But we found out this week that in the new Halloween special called Trick or Treat Scooby-Doo, there is going to be confirmation that Velma is actually a queer character. She meets a character on it and apparently has all the stereotypical, cartoon, she looks into her eyes and her glasses fog up and her cheeks turn red and she clearly is infatuated. And yeah, I mean, this is really kind of cool to get this as canon that this character is in fact queer. Not that these things need to be a big deal, but I know every little bit helps. Everything helps people feel seen. Everything makes people feel accepted and feel like they are connected to culture. And so here we are, and we have finally a confirmation of queer Velma. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I'm a little disconnected from the current continuity of stuff, but I'll say that it's interesting to see some of these icons that have been around for so long that you look back and you're like, yeah, I think they were kind of hinting at that stuff in that era where it would have been harder to do, where you would have had slang like are you a friend of Dorothy, which is I think for gay men, but I hope I'm not wrong in saying that was like a LGBTQ sort of thing, where it was like being able to figure out like, I'm not really sure, are you a friend of Dorothy, like are we cool, or is this going to cause a ruckus to reveal my orientation? So having it be more explicit here seems like a good positive change.
Yeah, and I think any time you can see queer characters interacting in a completely normalized way, as it is and should be, all over the place, I think it just gets us that much closer to it not being different, to it being just part of everyone's lives. And I think that's a positive thing, no matter how you look at it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I guess maybe spoilers for Andor, but there's a bit of that in this week's episode, isn't there? Yeah. Like I may not have caught it properly, but I think that was stated there. So
yep,
it's not even like, I don't think I saw any news media about that. So it's becoming more of a just a ho hum. Like, yep, that's a normal part of life. It's not a big deal. Like Ellen or Ricky Martin or anybody else you might think of from not really that long ago.
Yeah, no, true. And a follow-up story. Unfortunately, Velma is going to get fridged in the next episode of the Scooby-Doo Mysteries because, kill your gays is such a horrible trend in television.
Ouch.
No, I kid. But oh man, if that was scary. We'll talk about that when we come around to Game of Thrones conversation this week, the House of the Dragon stuff, because it was right there for a second.
Alrighty. Are we there yet? Yeah, okay. So we're at the part of the show where we start talking about Star Trek and other sci-fi things we're following this current iteration. And so right now we're doing Lower Decks, and the episode tonight was A Mathematically Perfect Redemption. And I pretty much fell asleep during this episode.
What?
I didn't really, but yeah. I don't know. It was meh. It was like Birdman meets Toaster.
No, Tim, that is not the elevator pitch, right? So I changed my mind a few times. My elevator pitch kind of boiled down to a very poorly written out Peanut Hamper has their Con on City Alpha 5 experience, but also Avatar, right? So
that's good. I like that.
That sounds like it's a little bit more jazzed up than how you're describing it. But not everything's for everybody. That's okay.
It was all right. I mean, it was a sort of a, I don't know, what do you call it, an edge piece, I guess, right? So
yeah, it's funny. I did see as I was looking for a little bit of background information after I watched the show, I did see some feedback on a couple of boards where some people were like, oh no, that was really funny, and some people were vehemently the other way. They're like, I didn't see my main characters. I don't care about this. I think this is the worst episode of the season. And I was surprised that people have such strong feelings. I mean, obviously, we're invested with the main four characters and some of the good side characters that are on the Cerritos. But I thought this was funny. Like, I mean, you're right, Jaime. Like, it was kind of deliberately derivative of so many sci-fi tropes, which is what Lower Decks does. But it also, it takes those as it constantly does, and it turns those things on its side and laughs at them. And there was a lot of funny moments in this episode. I mean, they went places that I was like, oh, they're not going to go there. And like, at one point that toaster has sex with that bird, man.
That's true. That is true. I mean, it had that sort of, V'ger kind of vibe too, like, being left behind. And I mean, they could have gone several different directions with this episode, right? In terms of this sentient, what do you call it? Android, I guess, right?
Well, she's an exocomp, yeah.
Exocomp, whatever that is, right? Is that a TNG thing or something?
Yeah.
Or
yeah.
Okay, all right. Why is it called Peanut Hamper? That's just her name?
She got to pick her own name.
Oh, okay, and she chose that name. Yeah, I don't even remember her from what was it season? What season are we in? Season 1 or 2 of this show?
This is season that we're in right now, or did she first appeared?
No, that Lower Decks is in season 3, right?
This is season 3, episode 7. We're talking about tonight, and
yeah,
she
but what I'm saying, like
last episode of season 1, because that's the one where Shax quote unquote dies, and the reason he has to die is because she bails.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I don't. To be honest, I vaguely remember the character, but I don't remember her abandoning them or saying that's no way I'm going to do that kind of thing. But yeah, that's kind of where it starts off. It's her perspective of that episode, right? So, yeah. So what was your best pew pew?
I mean, what was the best bit of action? Clearly, it was Peanut Hamper and Rada.
Oh, the action, yes.
But it was the action on the waterfall.
I wrote down the areolas fighting. Predominance,
yeah, or the pronunciation of areola. Like,
yeah,
somebody trips over that word a couple of times.
Yes, I think that was again a deliberate choice, but yeah, that was good. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
For Easter eggs, I thought it was very funny. The J.G. Hertzler came back. Of course, I think he was in a previous episode of as a voice on this, playing his former Klingon character. And now he's come back, and he was the voice of the captain of the Drukmani Scavengers. So another familiar voice back. And then at the end of the episode, we got the return of Jeffrey Combs, who, of course, we all loved on Deep Space Nine. He came back this time as Agamus again, who he played in season 2, episode 7.
Yeah, and it's funny because I remember I was waiting for them to fade back, how they peeled back the camera, showing all these sentient, bad computers that are stored in this.
Oh, you mean the self-aware megalomaniacal computer storage room?
Yes, that's the one. But when they backed up last time, I vaguely remember I took actually, if you look at our show art from that episode, that's what the shot I used was. It was all the robots. I think one of them was HAL 9000 and a few other sort of well-known, problematic computers over the years, right? Speaking of Easter eggs, right?
Oh yeah, no, that room, and it was filled with all the ones from classic Trek episodes because it's again well-worn trope.
Yeah, it had Nomad, and there was another one from. There's a couple from the original series that kind of went bad.
Yep. So that led me to my big question of the week was, now that Peanut Hamper and Agamus are stored next to each other and multi-episode assorted, they can't have cast Jeffrey Combs and then brought him back and then not plan to go somewhere. Do you think we'll see these two team up in some sort of weird future episode?
Yeah, possibly. You mean when they escape from the megalomaniacal self-sentient...
No, self-aware megalomaniacal computer storage room.
Right. Yes. So what is that? What are the letters for that?
SAMCS.
Yeah, I do believe that they're going to continue this plot thread, not necessarily in this season, as we've seen. Like they went back to a one-shot, one-off character of Peanut Hamper and made them arguably a lot more well-rounded in this one, at least until they pull the rug out from underneath us. And there were some Easter eggs and a quote that I'd like to put in here. So the Easter egg hunt, they mentioned Free Cloud, which was, I can't remember if that was Picard or Discovery. I'm started blurring in my mind which one had the casino one.
Picard.
It was Picard? Okay, so that's where 7...
Yeah, they both had casinos, but I think that was the one on Picard, yeah.
That's where they met up with 7 of 9 went or something? Or
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And my quote was, in relation to profanity from Peanut Hamper when she first meets the like village elder. He's like, "Oh yes, fudge indeed." He doesn't understand the exclamation. He just says it so deadpan.
He says, "What was that?" And she says, "Oh, that's just something we say." And then he said, "Yes, fudge indeed."
Yeah, I had flagged a couple of quotes. There was lots of good ones in this episode, but yeah, everything on the planet seems to fly. There's flying pigs and flying sheep and flying... At one point, they see a flying snake, and Peanut Hamper says, "If everything flies here, why call it a sky snake? Isn't it just a snake?"
Yeah, exactly. And there were some turtles later on, too, right?
Yeah. I also liked, "Oh, how I've longed for the touch of your nozzle." That's what Radha says when they start to get intimate.
Yeah, with the weird bird screech.
Yeah,
at some point I'm
song. Yeah. No, again, I think this was, certainly a digression for the show. It was, as some people have described it online, a big swing. They were kind of trying something. I don't think all of it worked, but I think that there was certainly enough there to continue to laugh at. In typical Lower Decks fashion, there was lots of little Star Trek jokes in there, and I think it holds up okay.
Yeah, and sort of the twisty ending where, she gets her redemption, but then she's also the person that set up the redemption, right?
Yeah.
Before being put into the self-aware megalomaniacal computer storage room.
Yeah.
All right, so we move on to She-Hulk.
Yeah. Before we do, it was kind of amusing to me how she was ranting about calling the Borg and you're all going to be Borg, and they kept having to like push down her little transmitter antenna, just like physically restraining her from making the transmission.
Yeah.
Right. Cool. All right. So She-Hulk, Ribbit and Ribbit.
So I gotta do my elevator pitch on this one, which is the penultimate episode of season 1 brings an unlikely but inevitable team up and a lot of Hulk smash and smashing.
And smashing, yes.
Yeah, I had written down She-Hulk gets down and dirty with Daredevil. It's almost like a t-shirt at that point.
That pretty much covers it, yeah. So this was, again, this show's always funny and it's always weird and goofy. This one was kind of a soft relaunch or a what do they call it? A backdoor pilot for the Daredevil show that we know we're getting. We already know we're getting it. So it's, we'd already seen Matt Murdock actually in the MCU. We saw Matt in Spider-Man No Way Home. And here we actually get to see him both as the lawyer, and then we get to see him as Daredevil. And of course, this iteration of Daredevil, he is wearing the gold and red suit. That is what he wore for the first 6 issues of his original series.
Oh, really?
And, we'll circle back around, but my big question for this episode was, oh my God, are we going to have to look at that thing for the entirety of the Born Again series? Because, it's rough.
Which one is this? What are you talking about? The suit?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that ties into my quote, which was Matt as Daredevil says, "I'm Daredevil." And Jen says, "Well, it is very daring to use ketchup and mustard as your colored scheme."
Exactly, yeah.
Which I was like, yes, I feel seen, Jen. Thank you for that. Yes. It was an awful look in 1963. It's an awful look in 2022. I get what they're going for. They're going back to basics and they're honoring the legacy and yada yada, but it looks stupid.
Yeah, there was a lot of good fourth wall stuff today with her talking to the audience about, how she's feeling about, being in the same room with Daredevil and Matt Murdock and all that stuff, right? So
yeah. Again, Tatiana Maslany is charming and very likable, and she's having a good time with it, and I think that's fine. And I know that this series is getting, rating bombed on Rotten Tomatoes and everything else by...
Is it?
Oh, yeah. I think it's like 80% from the critics and like 36% from the fans, but it's not 36% from the fans. It's getting bombed.
But you know what? The thing about a show like this is, I mean, I generally get the vibe that it's targeting a more female audience than male. I mean, that's okay, in my opinion, right? Yep. And why not, right? I think that generally paints a target on anything. Whenever you have something that's
totally
meant to be, it's a boys' show, but it's got girl themes in it, right? And feels, God forbid we have feels in the middle of a show like this, right?
Yeah. Well, and again,
even if the feels are like, hey, let's skip the dinner kind of feels, right?
Yep. And we've gotten, in the last couple episodes, we had her having, starting a dating quasi-relationship with a guy where she goes on multiple dates and eventually they sleep together and she's disappointed and frustrated that he's not calling. And so we get that sort of trope of, women want a relationship. Why isn't it working out for her? Yada, yada. We get the episode where she, as Jen, goes on the dating profile and doesn't have any luck and then goes on a She-Hulk and ends up meeting this guy and sleeps with him. And now in this episode, she ends up, sleeping with Matt and, making some pretty, eye contact-y comments about it afterwards, saying like, it was a pleasure to meet you, a real pleasure. She's a sexually empowered, strong, independent person. And yeah, she's got a lot of layers to her, but like, they're not just pigeonholing her as, the sort of...
And yet, at the end of the show, what do they do with her when she's in they start playing, the guys who are doxing her or whatever start playing the sex tape of her, right? Like, is that the only way we can, take power away from women is by exploiting them?
But that's it, right? That's the whole thing is we've established her as a strong, sexually empowered person who, a
threat, therefore, yeah.
Yeah, and then, of course, the way for these men to ruin her is to slut shame her and to make her feel lesser than because she feels that way, which is exactly what men do on the internet. So again, it's all pretty front and center, and I don't think it's done badly at all. But then we also kind of get that, when she's standing there in front of this big screen and she's seeing that they've clearly recorded her and are showing that, she of course turns into the hysterical woman trope where she smashes the screen and she's out of control. So it's, like, again, I don't think they're doing these things unaware. I think this is Disney and it's, a bunch of good writers, and I don't think they're going into it lightly, but it's interesting to see the kind of rope that they're walking with this character. And again, I get that it's not for everybody, but I like it. I think this is smart and funny and fun.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. From that perspective, it is true that, she's not judged on her ability as a lawyer. She's judged constantly on this show by the clothes she wears.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? Like,
Well, and look earlier in the episode when she has that, meeting with the client who says he has to, meet up with her ostensibly to talk about this, Wakandan spear that they're trying to get back off him, but essentially it's because he thinks he can get her into bed. And she's like, no, I'm, a strong person and I decide who I sleep with and when I sleep with them, and I have no interest in sleeping with you.
Yeah. And do you think he's the guy behind the whole deal?
I don't know. I mean, I think they're setting, to me, I got him more as the, the buffoon, not the villain. Again, we talked about the intelligentsia in previous episodes, clearly that they're the ones who have made up the website, that are slagging her and death threats and everything else. Again, shocker that, speaking of, bang on tropes, a powerful, good looking woman comes along and, how do they make her lesser than? Well, they call her names, they make her feel, bad, they threaten her, they, hypersexualize her and everything else. But I'll be curious next week. Hopefully we'll get a little bit more of this coming to a head. It is the final episode next week of who the intelligentsia
Which she even comments on in The Fourth Wall, right?
Yeah. Am I about to get fridged? Is this the twist before? Is this the final episode coming up? Like, that sort of stuff that they play fast and loose with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of, so you mentioned an Easter egg there with the Wakanda spear. I had Mac Murdock down as an Easter egg too, but you saw that one coming, obviously.
Oh yeah.
Frogger, the Frogger game in the lily pad lair.
Yeah, that's a good one.
The Walk of Shame, of course, and this time it was the man doing the Walk of Shame.
And again, a beautiful juxtaposition of the standard, right? It's not Jen doing the Walk of Shame, it's Matt doing the Walk of Shame, and it's not a Walk of Shame. Yeah. He's got a big smile on her face, and she's got a big smile on her face. Like, again, two people who find each other attractive can do whatever the heck they want behind closed doors. It's their lives, right?
Right. And then the Ginger Rogers comment, that Ginger Rogers did everything that Fred Astaire did everything that he did except backwards and in high heels.
Yeah. Yep. Good point. Really good point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What was her saying?
I feel like that fits into, so my best pew 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 leads into where I think they kind of went, not only through this whole season, but through this episode in particular. So my best pew 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 was the She-Hulk versus Daredevil fight on the parking garage area.
Mm-hmm.
Thought that was pretty cool. It is he holds his own, but it is pretty clear that She-Hulk here in this fight, in the warehouse fight that the hideout fight later on, and throughout most of the series, she mostly outclasses everybody, right? And having her get hit by a baseball bat, and she's like, "Are you serious? Did you think that was going to work?"
Yeah.
And they're setting, in my mind, this juxtaposition of no matter how powerful she is, She-Hulk cannot punch misogyny. She can't punch revenge porn away, even though she literally tries to in a very obvious way here. And it's one of those things where she keeps getting brought down for things that have nothing to do with getting punched in the face by somebody more powerful, right? So that's where I thought that was pretty interesting to bring that together in this episode.
Yeah, the other thing too that was interesting was that she throws a car at Matt Murdock or at Daredevil to stop him, right? And of course trashes this expensive car. And as they're about to leave the scene, he says to her, "Well, you trashed this place," and she says, "Oh yeah, I better leave a note."
Yeah, yeah, and it's for comic book readers, there's a little extra Easter egg in there too. There was a very famous issue of Daredevil where Daredevil, who is ostensibly one of the least superpowered people, takes on the savage, incredible Hulk. Hulk ends up in New York City. Daredevil ends up having to fight the Hulk in New York City because no one else is available, and barely escapes alive because it's the freaking Hulk. Come on. And there was a little bit of an echo in there of this. And again, it wasn't overt, but there was a little something there if you were a longtime Daredevil comic book fan as well, which I really liked. The other couple Easter eggs that I caught, they mentioned that the Sokovia Accords have been repealed. I think that's the first time that we actually got confirmation that, because it seems like superheroes have kind of been acting with more impunity post-snap. And I guess that helps clarify that was why. They don't have to declare themselves to the government. They don't have to do all the things that they would have had to do under the Sokovia Accords. And in that last scene in her apartment, Jen says, is this a twist where, do I get fridged? Or, is there a third Hulk and he's red? Well, the Red Hulk is in fact a character from the comic books, and it's entirely possible we'll be seeing the Red Hulk in Thunderbolts. So that was that was a genuine Easter egg for we could be seeing that sooner than later.
My one quote, and I don't know if this counts as a quote, it's more of an explanation that I thought was nice. So the quote I liked was Jen Walters talking to, oh crap, I can't remember if she was talking to Daredevil or she was talking to Matt Murdock at that point in time. She's like, wait, are you not actually blind? Because that's very problematic as a, wait a minute. Is this dude not actually blind? Yeah. And I also liked the explanation of the fine distinction between goons and henchmen, where henchmen, believe in the cause apparently, and goons are just mercenaries who just want the money.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to Andor. The episode was called "The Axe Forgets," and at one point, Skeen says, "The axe forgets, but the tree does not."
Yeah, that's his whole quote was, "The axe forgets, but the tree remembers. Now it's our turn to do the chopping." Great quote, great delivery too. That guy's good.
Who's got the elevator pitch?
I had a really simple one, which is just tensions run high on Aldhani and Coruscant on the eve of the big rebel payroll heist. So this was basically, it was table setting, and we get these kind of episodes from time to time, especially in series that have shorter episodes where it really is about just sort of getting everything set because you're going to have a huge set piece, action piece in the next episode. But this was done really well. You felt on all fronts. You felt it on the scenes with Mon Mothma. You felt it on the scenes with Luthen. You felt it on the scenes with the characters on Aldhani, the 7 rebels, including Cass. And yeah, it was a funny episode because in a lot of cases, this would have been, people would have labeled this as the worst episode because it really wasn't high on action, but they did a really good job of pacing and just cutting the film, though it was edited really well, to really heighten the tension as you're going into it. So by the time you end at the episode, like I was just like, I really want to see how this starts to play out now, because you get a little bit more about the characters. You start to invest. We're going to talk about it when we get into our House of the Dragon recap as well. But I saw a little parallel between these two things, having just watched them within a few days of each other. Some of my criticisms of House of the Dragon are about the fact that we're kind of blowing through time periods, which is good in one way, but it's poor in another. You don't have enough time to bond with the characters and really feel invested. So when something bad happens to one of them, you're like, Here, they take the time to really set up. Like, you actually start caring about Vel and Skeen and Nemec and Cinta and even Terramin and Gorn. And, you're caring about what's happening to Mon Mothma. You care about what's happening to Luthen. And of course, Cass is our star, so we're caring about him the most. But they really give you a lot of things to invest you in the characters, so that next week when it starts going sideways, and most of these people aren't going to make it out alive, it'll be really interesting to see, to feel that difference, feel that resonance when it happens.
Yeah, for sure. There's a slow burn on this one, but I do think it was important to have this episode as we learn about the whole gang and who they are from the prep work that's going into, the big showdown, the big heists they're going to do. So that's part of my elevator pitch. And the B line, the B plot is, call 911 because there's some sick burns from Space Mom.
Oh, yeah.
Just tearing it. Yeah. What's his name? Is it Karn? Is that his name? I forgot. I keep calling him Kyle MacLachlan Karn.
Yeah.
Yeah, just these sick
Cyril
burns.
Karn, that's what they call him.
Yeah, something only a mother parent could do.
Yeah, she's. Yeah, I mean that ties into the Easter egg I had, where of course he pours a bowl of cereal and she pours the blue milk over the top of it, and then just rips him a new one. And then we cut back, we do a bunch of other scenes, come back. He's sitting in the same spot with the same 30-mile stare, and his mom is still ripping into him. Oh man, hard to believe he went to a faraway planet.
I think that was another day.
I'm sure it was, but man, I think that's the whole point, is he's just like, every day is the same for him now, where he just sits there and gets berated by his mother.
So Easter, have we talked about the TIE fighters buzzing?
No, I mean, that was what I had flagged as the best pew pew pew, is that's the scene where they think that the TIE fighter has avoided them, and then it loops back around and just buzzes them. It's funny because, you realize how big and how small Star Wars can be in those moments. So when we see the original Star Wars movie, TIE fighters are a bit more of a concern. We have to fight them in a couple of different spots, and they're more formidable. As the series goes on, and especially as we get into the other series, they really are not that formidable as a thing. But when you are like standing on the ground and have no shelter, you can see that these things are genuinely terrifying. And
they have an amazing sound. Like, the sound is terrifying, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, especially on the big woofers and stuff.
Right? Yeah, but it's funny because for the longest time now, I've never really thought, like, I had sort of moved them to a lower tier of Imperial weaponry, where I was like, I was scared of that thing. But here, one small solo TIE fighter is the most terrifying thing that they could have encountered. And that was really interesting to me, because it made me think about just how small this story is, but how intimate it is, that one TIE fighter is as bad for them as Luke and Han seeing a Star Destroyer or the Death Star. Because it's the difference between life and death in this case, right? Like, a TIE fighter could kill every single one of them really easily.
Yeah, or turn them in as well, because it could be like, that's why they have to run and cover the guns. It also buzzes they kind of call it the dam, the part where the commanders, because they also do buzz that, and it's kind of like, as the the commander of the whole place is walking by, and I'm like, you don't think he's going to have a word with that pilot when he gets back to when he lands? Right?
I'd have paid $1 million to hear him yell "Maverick."
Yeah, right. Yeah, because they're like buzzing the tower.
It's buzzing the tower. That's right.
Yeah, not like that doesn't happen in the new movie too.
The other thing that I had flagged for an Easter egg, and this is a bit of a deeper cut. So when what's her name? Miro, the Imperial officer who's trying to sort of piece together inside the security branch. She's trying to piece together the pieces that seem to be disparate but are connected. She's talking about all these different things, and one of the things she mentions obviously, where Cass was and where that happened, but she mentions Kessel, and Kessel is the scene of the first 3 episodes of Star Wars Rebels. And so when she's talking about these seemingly disparate things that are somewhat interconnected, that to her spell a pattern that means the rebels are starting to put it together, and she says, if I was going to start a rebellion, this is how I do it. The fact that she references Kessel is interesting on 2 fronts. One, it centers us on timeline-wise. We know that what Cass is going through right now overlaps more or less with the beginning of Star Wars Rebels, which is kind of cool, because you can then orient yourself to, okay, I know what else is happening in the universe and the galaxy and stuff like that. But the fact that was a big enough thing that, it's made its way into this is really interesting too. And it also is going to tie forward into when we get into the Ahsoka series, because obviously that is sort of a spiritual sequel, if not literal sequel, to Star Wars Rebels too. So
yeah, I like the fact that I guess the quote there was, "It's so random it can't be random." I think he says.
Mm-hmm. That was my quote that I picked up as well. It's like a really good one, right? Because if you have somebody doing something as simple as like, I need you to sit here for 10 minutes and flip a coin and just mark down, what came out heads, what came out tails. If you don't have really weird, weird to like human intuition of like, oh, it wouldn't be like heads 10 times in a row. It's like, yes, actually it will. And it will be counterbalanced by just as many times where it's tails 10 times in a row, because having it be random of like 1, 2, 4, 1, 7, 8, like these sorts of things like that doesn't happen in the real world. The real world ends up with bizarre patterns that appear to our human brains to be like, oh, that's like a signal. It's like, no, that's just the way it works. And so their point there, like, these are spread out so far, it can't be a rebellion. There's no connection. It's like, well, that's kind of the point, right? You would expect that, there could be some subterfuge here because it's a little too random. Why aren't they concentrated a little bit more, kind of thing? So I like that one.
Yeah, yep. And I almost broke down in tears because of one of the Easter eggs. The gizmo that the young lad, I want to call him Mouse because he looks like Mouse from The Matrix, right?
Yeah, Nemec.
Mimic, yeah. He shows Andor a technology, and it's actually an SX-70 from like the late 70s, early 80s. And those things are so valuable, and the prop guys have taken it and modified it, whatever, but it so clearly to me was an SX-70 camera. I have one here that's got a slight crack in it. It really breaks my heart every time I see it. But they were Polaroid cameras. I basically folded up flat and then opened up, and it was like a really cool industrial design from that period. It had a brushed aluminum body and then leather patches glued onto it to give it a sort of really kind of cool I guess steampunk kind of feel, but really, really well designed. They're in the Metropolitan Museum of Modern Art, right? And here these guys at the Industrial Light and Magic have taken them and painted it black and glued things to it, and made me cry to see that. Still a cool camera, though.
Yeah, that's a cool Easter egg. I didn't notice that. That's awesome.
Yeah, well, I have one. You've seen our SX-70. We have one in the family.
Yep.
It's one of the family heirlooms.
Dibs.
I keep thinking I got to start writing prices on the bottom of all my stuff, because between you and me, you're the only one that would understand the value of these things like that I've got here.
Yeah, to be fair, your partner there has said the same thing about some of the patterns that are in her collection. She says, some of these things are worth a lot of money. Don't just sell them in bulk. I said, I have the same thing downstairs in my basement, so I feel you.
Yeah, exactly.
So last and not least for this episode, without digressing into the Mon Mothma family drama session where her husband is a complete tool and her daughter doesn't seem much better, do you think that this is going to follow the pattern of Rogue One? Is this going to be a bloodbath next week, or is this going to be a happily ever after? Everybody makes it out okay, hurrah, hurrah.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Because even the Imperials, I don't know, are they Imperials now? I don't know at this point.
On this part, they are, yes.
Yeah, they don't know, like they're not anticipating. They comment on the fact that the last time there was like 50 people came to this big ceremony. They could potentially be a lot, right? I don't know if that means that they've beaten them back to like almost out of existence or whatever, but I think that there might be a lot of people there for this ceremony that's coming next week, right? And who knows what special effects Industrial Light and Magic is going to bring to the party here, right? And then this impossible escape plan, which I talked about last week, right? That they're all and it's funny, like they're all sort of nobody really knows. Nobody has their finger on the whole thing, and the only one that seems to be totally confident about his or her capabilities seems to be Andor, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and it's the four men go down and they're going to pretend to be Imperial troopers, and the two ladies have taken off in another direction with weaponry and kind of. What are they? The snipers are going to sit up high, and like who knows? Like there's kind of a mystery in terms of what their role is, and it's funny how nothing like the trope in these kind of things is they have the little model, and the guy comes in with the little stick and he points to all the different things, and you're going to do this and you're going to do that, and they have them all repeat what their phases are going to be, because it's all going to be perfectly timed. None of that is happening in this story, right? It's like we got this model, this is what it looks like. And you're gonna do this one thing, and nobody's talking about what anybody else is doing, kind of thing, right? So there's a real sort of sense of mystery for the audience in terms of what is going to happen next week, like you said, right? So
yeah,
it'll be interesting to see. I'm sure we're going to lose some people, but and is this how many episodes is this show?
12.
12. Okay, and we're at what episode?
This was 5. So apparently, the way they're telling it is that this is a series of 3-episode arcs. And told over 24 episodes over 2 seasons. So there's 12 episodes the first season. And so basically, as we saw the first 3 episodes came all at once, that sort of tells the story of how Cass ends up basically meeting up with the rebels. This one is the bank heist. And then there'll be a new sort of storyline for the next 3, and then the 3 after that to wrap up season 1. And then, yeah, 4 more arcs over the course of season 2.
Yeah, because there's got to be a redemption story for Deirdre, right? And Lieutenant Blevin, and as well as our friend Boimler. What's his name?
Karn.
Karn, yes. Cyril Karn. Yeah, they each. I mean, each one of those, they're foils to Andor in a sense, right? And they're building towards something big each, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it seems like it's just a matter of time before Miro connects with Karn, and Karn refines his purpose, which is Cass, right? He'll figure out that he's kind of the glue of this sort of storyline. Yeah, and also we know that somewhere down the line we're going to get a storyline where he encounters and adopts K2SO, right? But I don't think that's coming till season 2.
Mm-hmm. Oh, is Alan Tudyk in the show?
Alan Tudyk said he's coming back, but I think he said not till season 2.
Oh, interesting.
Because I think it's also going to get a little, not like wildly, but a little time jumpy. I think it's going to move forward a little bit so that we sort of see him as he leads towards Rogue One.
Yeah, because he's got to gain prominence in his role in the Rebel. I mean, the thing is, he hasn't, like, they all seem to have bought into the rebellion, but he hasn't, right?
Yeah, and that's sort of what boils over for them, right? Is they all have real reasons for that, and he will never talk about it, and that's why they're all suspicious of him. The other thing that we talked about earlier in the episode, we were talking about, the queer characters. So there's intimation in here that's not put on total Front Street, but at one point, when they're sort of drinking and passing the bottle around, so we already saw in the last episode, Cass is sort of checking out Cinta when she's repairing his arm, and there's like he's clearly giving her a look up and down. We know from the first couple episodes that he's a bit of a player. He certainly seems like he's been involved with a lot of women, and you can see him checking her out in the last episode. In this episode, he offers her a drink, and you kind of get that vibe that he's still kind of checking out whether there's something there, but then we also get the vibe that she and Vel are together.
Yeah, the like that bed is already warmed or something to that effect is like a quick one-off statement of like, buddy, don't bother kind of thing. They're taken.
Yeah, and I guess that's it's meant to be sort of a throwaway line. If you're really not paying too much attention, you might miss it. But yeah, there's sort of this intimation of dude, give it up. It's not going to happen. She's already got someone, and she's standing over there.
Yeah,
which again is again we talked about it. It's that very normalized queerness, right? It's not like they have to walk around and scream, we're here, we're queer, get used to it. This is just part of the dynamic, right?
Mm-hmm. It's more of a dang instead of a what kind of
exactly
that it might have been in like the 90s if this show was made then. So
yeah, great point.
Mm-hmm. I am definitely going to try to remember that in my Easter egg hunt they mentioned I think it was the Imperial officer who talked about their randomness. They mentioned Hosnian Prime briefly. You caught on Kessel. I picked up Hosnian Prime, which has its one movie appearance as a bright shining beacon in The Force Awakens. As one of the planets, spoilers, gets destroyed by the what did they call the dude?
Starkiller Base.
Starkiller Base. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, because they ran out of good titles. Yeah.
Well, Starkiller is anyway. That's a whole different thing.
Starkiller is the name of the original Luke Skywalker name, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It needs a Comic-Con like. Well, actually, it didn't really kill any stars. It seemed like really clear it was killing planets or possibly planetoids. Really hard to tell from camera, but clearly the other one was a star kind of thing.
Worst summary ever.
Yeah. All right, cue the Game of Thrones theme as we move into the House of Dragon. With the blood flowing in this one, right?
Yeah.
Driftmark's the name of the episode. And
the funeral of Princess Lena brings together all the royals, sparking some dazzling conflict, ending with each side landing a dragon.
Right.
Those sound legit. I put Daemon best uncle ever. And possibly the alternative title is The Twinkle in Your Eye as a nice fun one.
I think I Want You kind of sums it up too. This HBO at me if you want. I can write some descriptions for your episodes. I feel comfortable now. I feel like I'm getting my groove on the elevator pitches. This was a banger of an episode. It's funny because it was
literally.
Yeah, it sort of started out as a bit of a slow burn. This really awful scene where everybody's together, and of course they're sending Princess Lena to her watery grave after she committed suicide by dragon in the last episode because she is encountering an awful childbirth, and and it just sort of goes off the rails all over the place. It's like every worst family wake mixed with every worst family wedding mixed with somebody bother somebody else's pet, and no, it just goes sideways. So we get the funeral, and then we get everybody's kind of staring daggers at each other at the wake, and sort of nobody's sure who to talk to each other, and Prince Laenor is standing in the ocean trying to decide whether or not to drown himself because he's lost his sister, and then it just starts to go from there where we get another amazing scene between Viserys and Daemon, where Viserys the king has to get up from his spot and hobble over, one arm down and a lot of worse for wear, hobble over to his brother and try and make nice with him again, at which point Daemon dunks on him again. And it's just it's kind of painful to watch as all this is sort of happening. There's all this sort of drama and everybody's kind of being snotty to each other. We move on to the scene with Aemond. So last episode we saw Prince Aemond, who is Alicent and Viserys's middle son, or second son, I suppose, middle child, second son. And last week they were making fun of him because he hasn't bonded with a dragon yet, and he decides to take it upon himself to head down to the beach and try and claim the largest dragon in the entire realm, which is Vhagar, who was Princess Lena's dragon. And I was waiting. I don't know about you guys, but I was just waiting for that kid to get barbecued. Like, I really thought that's where that was going.
Too. Yeah.
I thought he was going to try and claim him, and then he was going to die horribly, and somebody was going to blame the dragon, and there was going to lead to the thing. But it goes the complete opposite direction. He actually knows what to do, and he claims this gigantic, monstrous, like, comparing, so size-wise comparison, he is supposed to be about the size of an aircraft carrier compared to some of the other dragons, which are like Spitfires. Like, this is a massive. It's like claiming a nuclear bomb when everybody else is firing rifles. Like, this is a huge tactical advantage to get this dragon. And he lands this thing and he gets it back. And of course, as he's coming back in, he's claimed this thing. And they make a point in the last episode of saying, once you bond with the dragon will never accept another rider. Like, it's yours. So once it agrees that you can ride it, you are its rider, till death do you part. And of course, Vhagar knows that Laena is dead because he helped. So he's fine with Aemond claiming him. Of course, Aemond comes in, and the girls, so Laena and Daemon's daughters, are freaking out because the younger of the two of them was planning on claiming Vhagar as her own because she doesn't have a dragon. She's the one we sadly see standing in front of the fireplace trying to warm up that dragon egg last episode. She had intended to claim Vhagar for herself, and Aemon's basically like, you snooze, you lose. And she's like, we were at a funeral.
Yeah, we were busy, yeah.
So this leads to a really nasty scuffle where Jace and Luke, or Jacaerys and Lucerys, the two oldest sons of Rhaenyra and, let's face it, Harwin Strong, are basically, they show up. They're there to defend their cousins. It's basically a 4-on-1 fight. They go back and forth, but it gets really nasty really fast. Aemon picks up a rock and starts smashing them, starts punching, and just getting really nasty. And Jacaerys pulls out a knife at one point and slashes Aemond in the face, cutting his eyeball out. And so it just goes really off the rails from there. We end up with, this scene with basically all the players in the room and, the inevitable showdown that we've been waiting for the first time. We see an unhinged Alicent basically say, you're my husband, the king. You have to do something about this. And he says, no, I think, we have to come together as a family. We have to move on. She's
boys
like,
will
nope,
be boys. Yeah.
Nope, not good enough. And so she basically tells her man, Kristen Cole, to go out and cut out Lucerys's eye, Luke's eye. And when he, who is, we've established, a pretty scummy character, even when he won't do it, Alicent takes...
Oh, he was on his way to do it. His boss said no, right?
Well, yeah. And then, but even Kristen Cole says out loud, he says, I am your sworn protector. So even he is basically saying, like, I have lines, and chopping a child's eyeball out is not on the list.
Yeah, but he was making a move. He was heading over that way.
Cuts him off. And so, at that point, she reaches over, and not only does she grab the nearest knife, but the nearest knife happens to be the cat's paw dagger, which is one of the most important pieces of weaponry in the entire of this or the other show. This is the same dagger that they put in the fire that has the Song of Ice and Fire written into it in the blade, and the same one that Arya will eventually use to kill the Night's King. This is the weapon. And she pulls it out from Viserys's scabbard and runs towards this child. She's going to chop out the eye, and she ends up face to face and arm to arm with Rhaenyra, with this really dramatic scene. And, we get this beautiful, delicious line from, Rhaenyra, who basically says, now they see you as you truly are. It must have been so hard to hide behind all the artifice and those pretenses, and now they see you as you truly are, which is, and those two are so good. Those actresses are so good. And and she ends up slashing a nice chunk out of Rhaenyra's arm and losing the moral high ground in one fell swoop. This is really kind of like, holy smokes. But then we get a follow-up scene where on the one side we get the returned Hand of the King, right? We get the returned Otto Hightower, who's now back as the king because Strong, the old hand, just went up in flames last episode. And he's like, you know what? and so it's Aemond in the moment says, it's well worth it, mother. I would trade an eye for a dragon any day. And Otto says the same thing. He's like, your son was bang on. Like, trading an eyeball for the biggest dragon in the realm just tipped the scales of war to us. Like, good play by your son. We end up with this sort of last play in the end of this where, Laenor comes back and says, hey, I've been a really crappy husband. I haven't, done everything I can to support you. I promise to sort of redouble my efforts, be a better man, be a better, help you towards your ascension, Rhaenyra. And Rhaenyra's like, actually, I got another way you can help me. And so they play it out like, she has this passionate moment on the beach with Daemon. Clearly, they're in love with each other. They finally consummate this. And then she basically says to, Laenor, I got this other idea. We see this sort of pantomime play out where Daemon goes to Carl, and then Carl basically comes and challenges Laenor to a duel. It seems like they're having a sword fight, and it seems like Laenor dies and Carl disappears. And the idea is supposed to be that, we're supposed to think that Daemon basically bribed Carl to kill Laenor so that he can then marry Rhaenyra, Daemon. And that's what we're supposed to think. For a good 5 minutes there, you're like, pretty dark. And that, to be fair, is what happens in the book. That is exactly what happens. Here, they throw you the curveball of, it was actually a ruse. They killed a servant and threw him in the fire wearing Laenor's stuff, including his necklace. And Laenor and Carl escape across the narrow sea to go live their lives and be who they want to be and go do that. So when we were talking earlier about the fridging and or the kill your gaze trope, given that we just saw Laenor's previous partner, boyfriend, consort, Joffrey get his face caved in 2 episodes ago, it would have been a really dark, bad thing to have, not only as it does in the book, to have Carl kill Laenor, and then in the book, then Carl is in fact killed by Daemon to cover up his tracks. If they killed 2 prominent gay characters right after they just killed another gay character, this would have been very bad for Game of Thrones / House of the Dragon. So it's good that they wrote it out this way. It also makes Daemon and Rhaenyra's side seem more on the side of good versus Alicent's on the side of bad. Because
doesn't another character escape across the narrow sea in the first Game of Thrones?
Gendry.
Like isn't there
Gendry?
Who?
Yeah, it's the one where he basically gets in a rowboat and rows for 3 seasons and then rows back. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it does pay off for him at the end because he gets to sleep with Arya at the end. Spoilers. But yeah, it was a crazy episode. There's so much stuff that was packed into, an hour, just over an hour of television, crazy action. Again, things starting to come to a head, really sort of, heady stuff going on here. And, in the end, we end up with Alicent, or the Hightower side of things, ending up with the largest dragon in the land and 1 fewer eyeball, and probably a little less goodwill from the king. We end up with Rhaenyra and Daemon falling in love or consummating their love, and then also getting married in a traditional Valyrian wedding. And now we have this sort of power couple, which is exactly what Viserys wanted to avoid. And we end up with basically these like sort of now entrenched stakes. And at the end of this episode, we're also headed towards another time jump, because this is the last time we're going to see those kids there. We're going to jump forward another few years, and these kids are now in their 20s. So, it's going to be interesting to see how this sort of goes from here. But man, what an episode. Great television. This was really, really good television this week.
Yeah, I agree. There's a good quote that I want to put here. If you're accusing me of some depravity, you'll have to be more specific. As a nice one. I think that was Daemon who said that, but I did not write down the note. That was
Daemon, and that should be the introduction for that character. That was such a perfect hymn line, right?
Yeah. and for me, because I didn't catch any Easter eggs here, so anything that was there escaped my attention personally. But I was really keen on how they showed the Aemond taming the dragon Vhagar, because so you're right. I was also kind of expecting him to get toasted because this is Game of Thrones and it's like, look at this idiot. And they give the dragon a lot of personality of like, who is that? It's like, oh, it's just some dumb kid. And like, hey, like, I'm not going to kill you here, but like, if you keep messing with me, I am going to destroy you. Like, I'm a big dragon, fool. What did you think? To eventually being like, yeah, okay, fine. Get on the harness already. Just go. Just get ride. Fine. You know, like I felt actual emotion out of this dragon that does not exist and is basically a beast, right? Like,
well, they are supposed to be sensitive creatures. Like, they're not supposed to be just dumb animals. They are supposed to be quite thoughtful. They're not just dumb beasts, but at the same time, and this one in particular is supposed to be quite old. Like, at this point, that's why he's so massive, is that he's quite old and by far the oldest of all the living dragons. It's it almost seemed like he was taking the kid out for a test spin, didn't it, Jaime? Where he was just like, I tell you what, if you can get on and you can hold on, we'll talk about this.
Yeah, I agree there, and you're right. The dragons are not just dumb beasts. So it's a credit to the animators here that they animated a character who literally cannot talk and does not have normal human facial expressions to give them that much personality that I read into that scene.
Yeah. So the only thing I sort of flagged as my Easter egg was the cat's paw dagger just keeps coming back around and back around and back around. That one is just, it's hard to avoid. I'm sure there are many more. If I was a even deeper scion of the whole George R.R. Martin universe, that maybe there'd be more, but that was the one that caught me. I think the big question for this one is like this episode, even more so, like it's been slow burn. It was a Cold War. Now the war is boiling over. So if there's gasoline everywhere, where does the match? Like, what's the thing that really turns this from, well, we had a family squabble, it got out of hand and this kid lost an eye, to like, we're going to start killing each other, this is going to happen? Is it Viserys dying in the next couple episodes? Again, we've only got 3 episodes to go for the rest of the season. We've got 8, 9, and 10. Where do they want to leave off? What do they want to sort of have us build toward? And, typically in Game of Thrones, we've seen a 9th episode has been kind of the banger. Are we going to build towards something where, we finally see dragons in conflict, the kids fighting, actual Dance of Dragons, the war this season? Or are we still going to continue to sort of burn a little bit?
I was going to ask you that, is this the era of the Dance of Dragons stuff that's mentioned in, I don't know, like the DVD extras of some seasons of Game of Thrones, I think, is where you see the little, like animated
it is. And
comic
the Dance of
book
Dragons,
stuff.
Yeah, the Dance of Dragons is this where the two families plus all their allies basically go to war eventually, and it's basically open war over who will sit on the Iron Throne. And there's a lot of politics and there's a lot of death. And the one thing you have to remember in watching this series is the whole point of this is that this gets so bad that in the end there are only 2 living Targaryens. 3 if you include spoilers, 3, 2, 1, Jon Snow. But, at the beginning of Game of Thrones, there is simply Daenerys and her brother. That is it as far as the world knows for all Targaryens everywhere. So when you look at this and you include all the ones that are at Driftmark, all the ones that are in King's Landing, all the ones that are in Dragonstone, cousins, everything, like they're all gone within 170 years. So it's going to get bad.
Okay, so one more thing. And the you've got the saying from Laenor and Rhaena.
Oh God, that man Rhaenyra. Yeah, that was my favorite quote for the line was when Laenor is lamenting the fact that he wasn't there to help protect the kids when they have the fight with Aemond, and he says, "I should have been there," and Rhaenyra says, "Those should be our house words." I thought that was great.
Yeah. The motto.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yep.
Cool. So what's happening in the Rings of Power?
Another banger, another big pew 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 episode. So this was the battle for the Southlands begins with a roar and ends with a bang. Jaime, what you can jump into this one. What did you think of all this?
I thought it was a pretty good way to bring things together. So my elevator pitch would be spoilerific, I guess, that the villagers battle Adar's orcs and humans while Galadriel rides with the Númenóreans, and that's how we bring these plot lines together, which we had talked about, that like there's so much of this that is separated for so long that it hasn't come together yet. Now is the end of that, right? We've brought some of the plot lines together, and some of the characters together.
Yeah, this episode is distinctly absent of elves and dwarves. It is simply about men and orcs. But it really kind of brings, as you say, it brings it all together. We've had this whole storyline of Galadriel starting out, trying to sort of figure out the stuff with Sauron and piecing it all together, ending up at Númenor, getting them, rallying them, and then ending up basically racing in. And we were talking about, well, will they be there to save the day? Kind of. So they kind of start with, the tower that we've seen the humans, or half the humans anyways, hiding out at. We see the orcs marching on it, and we see that they're, they look like they're going to come in there and just slaughter all the humans and finally wipe out the last of the people in the Southlands. And it turns out to be a big trap where we end up with, one elf basically having to take on all of them. Arondir ends up with, dropping that tower that was up there on a group of the orcs and killing quite a number of them in that sort of good gambit by them. And then they go back into town and they basically fortify the town and think, okay, well, any orcs that show up, we'll kill them. It ends up being a little bit muddier from there, because the first wave of people that end up attacking and they end up fending off and thinking that they've sort of saved the day end up actually being the people that abandoned them. So that's a pretty delicious twist, where they thought they were protecting themselves against the orcs. They were in fact protecting themselves against themselves, and ended up killing basically each other for 10 minutes. And then the orcs actually do show up, and it goes pretty badly for the people. And it looks like it's going to be pretty bad for the last of the Southlanders. Bronwyn ends up getting shot full of arrows. There's the orcs end up taking the place, and then of course the Númenóreans show up just a little bit too late, and they end up coming in and on horseback and knocking things out. It's at this point where this is the sword fake thing. I don't know, and I'm curious to the two of you whether you guys sort of caught where that was going. At one point, Adar basically says to I forgot to write down the guy's name, the old guy who was the first one to sort of swear, the old human being who swore his fealty to him. He basically says to him, "I have a job for you." And then it's only there for like about 10 seconds, and then they cut, and then it's basically we see Adar taking off into the woods, leading on a horse chase with Galadriel and Halbrand. And, we're supposed to figure at that point that, Adar has the sword and he's going to go use it for some nefarious purpose. And of course, this whole time, the sword, this mysterious blood draining sword that's been this sort of MacGuffin for this whole first run of the series, is wrapped up, of course, in cloth. So you can't actually see it. They end up tracking him down. They end up catching him, and they end up bringing him back. And then at that point, you're like, it's Arondir actually is the one who flips it open and goes, "Uh-oh, this is not the sword. It's actually just a hatchet." And at that point, we see that old man. He's back up on the tower, and
Waldreg,
that's right. And he ends up basically using the sword, drains some of his blood out, ignites the sword. He uses it, and it's basically a key. He uses it, it twists, and it basically ends up flooding through all these tunnels that the orcs have been kidnapping people to dig, and it ends up flooding this volcanic chamber. It triggers this huge volcanic eruption, and it all ends up paying off with what Adar had been saying all along, which is, I want to create a homeland for my people. They shouldn't have to hide from the sun. So he basically triggers this volcanic eruption in what we will come to know as Mount Doom, and it blacks out the sky so his people can walk around wherever they want. Right. And because they're basically in the Southlands, which are ringed by mountains, it's a very hard spot for people to access, and it's also very, very hard to clear the clouds away. So it's going to cast that area in darkness perpetually, and basically he's done what he said he would do. He's created Mordor, or pre-Mordor as we know it. And the only other thing that's sort of worth mentioning in there is that when, they're trying to figure out that obviously he's not Sauron himself. They ask him, where is Sauron? And he says, I killed Sauron, which we know, of course, is not true. But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But in the end of all this, we end up with basically an ash cloud descending on the village where Bronwyn and her people are. Galadriel basically being sort of this ash cloud heading towards her at the end of the episode, and a whole lot of dead people, and just absolute chaos in this area where it seems an awful lot like, Adar has done what he set out to do, and he's escaped, and Galadriel, Halbrand, and Bronwyn failed and lost, and now the Southlands are lost.
Yeah, that was my that and the All Along the Watchtower with Arondir were my pew pew pews of the, like, wow, that is an interesting, like, I didn't know that the sword was going to be like a key, like He-Man opening up, Castle Grayskull with his unlocking it with his sword.
Right.
Like, I didn't see it going there for that, so I completely whiffed on understanding, or I should say predicting that one. But it was pretty satisfying to see the Mount Doom stuff occur. That was neat. Yep. I cannot remember whose quote this is, but I did like, you cannot satisfy thirst by drinking seawater.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, I don't know if it was a Numenorian thing. I don't know. Man, it just feels thematically like them, but I can't remember who said that, but it was a good quote.
Yeah, I think that was Isildur's father talking to
Elendil.
Yeah, Elendil talking to Halbrand, I think. I pulled this one quote, which I just thought was, again, it was delivered amazingly by what's her name, Morfydd. I can't remember her last name. The actress playing Galadriel. Before I drive my dagger into your poisoned heart, I will whisper in your piked ear that all your offspring are dead, and the scourge of your kind ends with you. Oof, that's some cold stuff.
Yeah, she was definitely, leading into that, she was like, oh, I've heard stories about elves getting twisted and becoming orcs, and like that's you. And he's like, Uruk, right? Their preferred word for themselves is Uruk. That was a good one. I gotta say, I haven't been super jazzed about the portrayal of Galadriel so far, but I did like that sort of take from the actress on that one. That one I thought was pretty good, because it felt like a oof kind of moment, as you mentioned there.
Yeah. I mean, that's some cold stuff to see somebody who got in handcuffs. The other thing that I have for an Easter egg, I was trying to look and sort of see if there was any kind of connecting the stuff. I did manage to see online that Udûn, which is the name of the episode, Udûn, is a word that, if in one of the languages from Lord of the Rings, means dark pit. So when this whole episode, they've been building towards creating this place, this dark place where the orcs can live safely and not have to fear the sun. They nailed that one. Interesting to see where they go from here. I mean, this, obviously, we talked about how, the tradition has kind of been in Game of Thrones to do the penultimate episode of the season as sort of the big action piece, and then we have one episode to sort of play it out. Here we've gotten this in episode 6 of 8. We've got 2 more episodes to play out. Obviously, we need to reconnect with the Harfoots and the Stranger. We need to reconnect with the elves and the dwarves and the Mithril. So there's some stories to be played out there, and obviously we need to figure out, who lives, who dies, and who gets out of the Southlands. Still lots of stuff to wrap out for season 1, but I don't know how they top this as far as sort of dynamic action between the fight scenes mixed with the explosions and the volcano and everything. I don't think there's any more bigger action to come this season.
All right, let's move on to our watch list, and John, you're up first.
Yeah, I had been meaning to watch this for a little while, but as evidenced by this episode, there's a lot of great TV on right now. But I did make the time to sit and watch the animated League of Super Pets this week. It is on Crave here in Canada, and I would imagine it's probably on HBO Max in the States. It is really kind of odd. It's basically, it's not like these are, it's sort of an origin story. Crypto, the Superdog, is already established as Superman's dog. He encounters a bunch of animals that are staying in a shelter. They, by circumstances of the movie, end up getting powers, and it's about them coming to grips with having powers and then them forming a team to help save the Justice League. It is a weird movie because it's both really, really puerile and child directed, and it's also at times kind of surprisingly dark. They're not talking about like, oh, we're going to imprison, like, they, not to spoil too much, but at one point the nefarious side that they're working against capture the Justice League, and they have a series of ingenious sort of 1950s 60s-esque traps for them. So at one point the Flash is basically stuck on a giant hamster wheel. He has to keep running, etc., etc. But what the bad guys are essentially purporting that they're going to do in this series, in this movie, is kill the Justice League. And they use the term kill and murder and stuff over and over again in this movie. And that's sort of the ultimate goal of the bad guys is murder. And yet it's also plays kind of like The Secret Life of Pets, where it's these sort of like quirky animals and the quirky animal jokes. And there's kind of, all these kind of funny animal things. So it kind of can't make up its mind about what kind of movie it wants to be. At times it's very, very much for kids. And at times it's like surprisingly grim and a little bit dark. And so it was ultimately, kind of not unsatisfying, but just a little bit unbalanced. That being said, it's, it is for kids. There are plenty of laughs. There are plenty of, funny things that happen in it. There are plenty of action-y things that happen in it. I don't think I'd have a problem showing it to, I don't think I would show it to a 4-year-old, but if I was like an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old, maybe, it's perfectly fine. It seemed like overkill to have Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson play Crypto. That seemed like a lot. Kevin Hart playing another digital animal seemed also a little bit much to take, especially with him being a prominent character in The Secret Life of Pets. But it was... I've had worse times sitting and watching DC animated movies by far. It's by far and away better than the adaptation they did of The Killing Joke, which is just a travesty on all fronts.
Right. So it's the best DC movie you've seen in a while?
Well, I mean, sadly, it's not much of a bar set for Justice League and DC movies. No, I mean, I like Suicide Squad, the Suicide Squad, the most recent one, better than this by far. Because at least it knew what it was going for.
This one is interesting in your description, because I would not have expected that. You don't really get that from the trailer. I didn't expect... It's kind of like how we mentioned that Star Trek Prodigy is like superficially for kids, but then it's like, man, this is some really dark content. Are kids picking this up? Like this is child slavery at the very basic core of this series here. So this feels like, after your kiddos graduate from the Paw Patrol movie, you look them dead in the eye and tell them that like the night is dark and full of terrors, and then put this one on to start learning them how difficult the real world is what it sounds like a transitional training wheels to it's not all fun and games. Sometimes there's some darkness here.
Yeah, I mean, it's not Zack Snyder, but it's there are some lines that are kind of blurry. And again, it just makes it unclear who they were aiming for. I wouldn't say it's like perfect family fare, and I wouldn't say it's for somebody like me who's obviously a veteran and experienced DC consumer. It's just a little all over the place. But yeah, if you want something sort of funny and actiony and a little mindless, you could do far worse. On my to be watched list tomorrow in our time, that is the 7th of October, Werewolf by Night, the new MCU set horror show, debuts on Disney Plus. I mentioned this a few episodes back that this was coming, and I mentioned that I'm not wildly excited about it, and I will be clear, I am not wildly excited, but I am curious. I am curious to see what they can do on that platform in that genre and sort of where it goes. I wasn't blown away by the trailer. I'm not a Werewolf by Night fan. I'm not a Marvel horror fan really much at all. I'm curious, though. I'm curious, given that Marvel has this reputation of turning, dog logs into gold. I'm really curious to see if they can pull something like this out. So I will definitely check it out this weekend.
Yeah, it's definitely got a very different style to it for an MCU property. It's way out there from what the trailer's shown us.
Yeah. I mean, it looks like a 1930s horror serial or something. It looks very, very, very unusual. Maybe that's just the trailer style they were going for. Maybe there's more to be done there. But yeah, it looks very off the beaten path for Marvel.
What do you got for Tommy?
You know, I know it always feels really early, and as we sit here, we're not quite at Halloween yet, being here in, first week of October. But just like any, store that you might go to, they're already like itching to put that Christmas stuff out there. And that's why I decided to tell you all about a new Universal Pictures movie called Violent Night, only in theaters December 2nd, which is possibly one of the best Christmas movie concepts I might have ever thought of like, what if you take two existing Christmas movies, like, classics here, like Tim Allen's The Santa Claus, where, Santa Claus is an actual real, and put that in a blender with another Christmas movie called Die Hard, and said, put those in a blender, and that is what you've got going on here. I almost feel like this trailer gives away too much. Like, it is nuts. Did y'all see any of this?
I saw this trailer, and I'm glad you put it in here. I had given it some thought, but I was kind of hoping one of you guys would grab it. It looks bonkers. It looks bonkers. David Harbour as like a maniacal Santa Claus is just, yeah. I wish it was on a streaming service. I really do. Like, I would probably watch this pre-Christmas. I don't know that I will make an effort to go see it, but it looks bonkers.
Yeah, there's some comments here in the YouTube video. And people are like, I'm glad this isn't just some parody video or an SNL sketch, right? Like, this is a weird thing to do, but they're gonna do it. Violent Night. ViolentNightMovie.com is the official URL. So I don't know, man. Like, I just couldn't believe that they're gonna make such a thing, and I think I'm in on it, at least to like watch. Like you, I'm not sure that this hits the tier of go see in theaters, but I'm definitely going to stream it should it become available.
All right, mine's Chaos Walking, starring Tom Holland and Daisy Ridley, about basically the new world, and I think it's like 240 years in the future. Earth, obviously the trope with the Earth is no longer habitable, and they've been making their way over to a new planet to live on. And the only problem, I mean, it could have been a really good sci-fi story. The idea is that it's now, like I said, 240 years in the future. This society has grown up of these people who've been on this planet, living in this world, and they're so far removed from the actual going to the planet. Like they're the sort of the first series of people that landed on the planet, and they are completely abandoned by Earth as we know it. The only weird thing about the movie, and it's sort of like an Old West kind of town, like there's a mayor and there's townspeople, and the Tom Holland lives on a farm with his stepfather or with an adopted father and a brother, who are both adults. And the weird thing is that on this planet, you can't hide your inner voice, right? So you hear, like when you think, he keeps saying to himself, he keeps repeating himself, I am my first name, last name, I forget the name of the character, but keeps saying, I'm Tom Holland, I'm Tom Holland, I'm Tom Holland, so that people can't read his thoughts, because like no matter what you're thinking right now in your silent voice, that's what others will see and hear. Like if you're imagining something, that's what they'll see. So, and the story takes place where a ship has arrived on the second batch of people with like 4,000 people on the ship, and Daisy Ridley and a bunch of other people are coming down to land on the planet. The men all freak out as they're coming down through the heat shield, and they all end up dying because they start panicking. The only thing is that Daisy Ridley's outer voice doesn't get triggered, so she survives this horrific crash, and so he discovers her, and then they find out. Tom Holland's character finds out that this again, it's one of these. Like I said, it could have been so good. The trope is that the women's voice, women don't have this problem, just men, right? So of course, what did all the men do? They had to kill all the women because they couldn't trust them because they couldn't hear their inner voice, right? So now she's basically being hunted, and he has to, protect her and get her to safety and all that kind of stuff. And they have to make their way across the Badlands, and they discover that in their trip that they're not the only, like his little village of people aren't the only ones out there. And of course, then the other ship is orbiting, and it's about to make landfall, and so she was sent out as a scout. So it could have been a really interesting movie. The concept of this inner voice thing being hidden was kind of cool, but the typical trope of the men not being able to trust the women and having to kill them all, kind of thing. That was a little thick. But yeah, it's sort of like I said, I wanted the movie to be a lot better than it was, right? And it probably, my mind was, I kept thinking about it after watching it, that they could have gone so many different directions with this story or with the setup, you know what I mean? Without having to fall back on the old women are evil and we must get rid of them kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Where did you see it, Tim?
It was I think it's on the Netflix, I want to say. It's been out for a while. I think it's a year or two old. So I think Tom Holland must have done this after the Spider-Man No Way Home kind of thing, right? So around that time period. And it's interesting because I didn't recognize Daisy Ridley at first. I knew she was an English actor, so I kept thinking she's was that Kira Sedgwick? Who's the other one that played Amadale? The one I'm thinking
Natalie
of.
Portman?
The other. No, the Keira Knightley.
Keira Knightley. Oh yeah.
Yeah, she looked a lot like Keira. I thought it was Keira Knightley, and I kept thinking, like, why does that not feel right? And then it wasn't until I checked the IMDb that I found out it was actually Daisy Ridley. But yeah, she's really good in it too. And there's a lot of interesting banter between the two of them because, of course, he's like imagining that they're making out, and she's like, "What the hell are you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, sorry."
I'm just looking at to see how it. It came out in 2021, but. It's 21% on Rotten Tomatoes from the critics and 71% from the audience, and the basically says like cool premise didn't work is basically the bottom line on it, which it sounds exactly what you're describing, right?
Yeah, exactly. As I was like even like the next day, I'm sort of imagining in my head, where the story could have gone because it doesn't, even though it does conclude, like it concludes in a typical kind of way, but. You kind of feel like there's more to it. Like it almost like it could use a sequel or become a TV series or something like that. You know what I mean? Like it's got one of those, that kind of vibe to it, right? Like the Planet of the Apes, for example, was such an interesting premise that when they came out with the second movie wasn't bad, and then of course the third movie was actually pretty good too, but they kind of, it's almost like the Lower Decks episode we watched today. They kind of take the plot and turn it sideways, and then they just went too far with it. And they eventually had a TV series as well. And the TV series wasn't horrible, but because they just used the premise, the setup, and then had adventures kind of thing, right? The movie could have gone so, because it's kind of like, it's an interesting setup, like from the point of view of like, okay, because like in her case, like. Her grandparents left Earth, right? And they're long dead. And then her parents, had a life, and then they're dead. And she promised her parents that she would go and, go to the new world. So by the time it's her turn to land, her ancestors are gone. And that's how long it took to get to this planet. That's kind of an interesting, concept from a sci-fi story kind of point of view, right?
Yeah.
Like Wall-E, where they've gone off for 3 or 4 generations and they've forgotten what it's like to be on Earth and things like that, right? Anyway, I guess that's it for another week. So, hey, Jonathan, people want to get in touch with you, where they find you?
You can always find me on Twitter and Instagram as @JPKNews.
And Jaime, if people want to get in touch with you, where would they find you?
I'm on Twitter as @DevWithTheHair.
All right, and my name is Timitra, Timmitra. On the Twitter machine is where you'll find me. Until next time, we'll see you in the future. Bye.
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 You've been listening to the Spotcast podcast. If you want to find out more about the podcast or see the episode show notes, visit the Spotcast website at spotcast.com. You can get in touch with us on the website or follow us on Twitter at Spotcast. If you have feedback or questions, send us a tweet with the hashtag AskSpotcast. If you like the show, please consider recommending us to a friend, writing a review on iTunes, or pledging any amount at patreon.com/Spotcast. You can find details on how to help us on our website, spotcast.com/sponsor us. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the future.
Oh, you know what we didn't talk about? Christopher Nolan at the Cinesphere.
I raised it because I happened to I went into the city last Friday to pick something up, and I noticed that there were signs up saying that Dark Knight was playing, and I had just gotten the 2 kids here to watch Batman Begins, and I said, hey, they're showing it at the Cinesphere, we could go see it there. If you guys want to see it, you actually can see it on the big screen. And as usual, I got
huge screen.
I got 1 yes and 1 meh. So I was like, never mind then.
Did you tell them that Interstellar was playing the next night?
I did not. I have not broken that news yet. But I don't know. He seems like he's into.
That's another good movie.
Another negative place as far as going to the movies. So who knows?
Yeah.
Well, you can work on him this weekend.
Can I?
Well, I'm told you're coming on Monday for what we here in Canada call Thanksgiving.
No, what I'm saying though is like the Sinister is closing for several months.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah, they're doing renovations. Yeah.
These are the last 3 movies for a while.
Yeah.
And again, like I'd forgotten how big that screen was until I went to TIFF and I sat in like not quite last row, but like maybe 3rd or 4th row from the back, and it's still a huge screen. And I was sitting in the corner, and it's still a huge screen.
Yeah, that's where I saw Back to the Future for the first time in 1985.
Yeah. Well, I saw the original movies that they played there back when IMAX first
I remember those too.
They were
all the IMAX special ones where it's like, half-hour-long documentaries and stuff. They were really...
Yeah, it was, and they felt like, it was like if they made them any longer, people would, jump out of windows and stuff, right? So.
I also, much to my chagrin, saw the Cirque du Soleil 3D movie there in IMAX.
Did you? Wow. In 3D.
The only movie that's made me want to bite my arm off and run from the theater faster was the Madonna version of Evita, which I had to sit through the theater with on a date.
You saw that
was agonizing.
Wow.
Yeah. This weekend is New York Comic Con as well. So I think we're going to get a bunch of news coming out of that. I think there's going to be a bunch of announcements, show new trailers, renewals, panels, stuff like that. So keep your eyes peeled for that stuff because there should be some interesting stuff coming out of that.
Interesting.
Nerd news.
Alrighty.
Are you gentlemen going to the Sky Dome for the games this weekend? Sky Dome, right? That was what it used to be from
that's what we still call it. So be damned the corporation that named it after themselves. But
the Roger Center,
no, unfortunately didn't get tickets. A friend, one of my colleagues at work, got himself tickets, but then he realized he has a conflict, so he ended up giving them to a friend. But it's...
Are they unobtainium now?
What's that?
Are they sold out now?
I would imagine they put them on sale last week. But it was like at that point, it was like sight unseen. It was you can basically buy the tickets, but we don't know if we'll have home games. We don't know if we'll, like they basically just kind of left it very, very hard to know what you were getting yourself into, and that's how it ended up biting my friend in the butt. He basically bought 2 tickets, and then he ended up with a conflict where he was just like, "Well, no, but I can't do that." So. But yeah, I'm just looking. There are tickets. There's still tickets for sale. There's the occasional pair here and there, and I'm sure if you go in the aftermarket, you can get them too. But they're not cheap. Like even I think face value for something like you want to be down on the 100 level, which is like field level. It's like $200 a seat, which if you're a baseball fan, is not the end of the world, but that's not cheap either.
Is that what they are normally, or
no? That's double, basically double.
Okay.
So,
well, it's playoffs, right?
Well, normal. Do you mean regular season, or do you mean normal for playoffs? Because playoffs always go higher.
Yeah, no, I mean that's normal for the playoffs to do that double price. But I mean usually you can get a really decent seat on the field level at that building for $80. This time of year, those are $180, $190, $200 for the same kinds of things. I'm just taking a look. So there's still tickets available for Sunday. So if it happens to go to the game 3 of the potential 3-game series, to sit in 25 rows back from home plate is $225 a ticket, $240 a ticket. Canadian, of course, Canadian dollars, but still, it's not nothing. If you want to go sit up in the upper deck, the nosebleed section there, where you're sort of way above the field, that's $190. So yeah, I mean, I'm a fan, but I don't know if I'm a spend $400 plus parking, snacks, and otherwise to go see it kind of fan. I gotta say, I mean, maybe this is being a spoiled Blue Jays fan, having lived through 2 World Series. The urgency is still not there. I was talking about this with a friend of mine who's a Raptors fan, and he said, it's amazing how much latitude you'll give your team once you've won a title. And I said, it's true to the point that like last time we won a title was 1993, and I'm still like, I saw him win a title. Like, it's funny how blasé you can get. I mean, obviously I'm still a fan and I still support the Raptors, still support the Blue Jays, but the Blue Jays and Raptors both still have a lot of goodwill from the fact that they actually got over the hump and won those titles. That's why it's still like more enticing, I think, to go and spend the money on Leafs playoff tickets or something like that, because they haven't done it in 50 plus years, Yeah,
I can definitely understand that, because the Blue Jays have been there before. From a Toronto fan perspective, this is just the wild card, whereas this is taking place in Seattle. This is way different after 21 years of futility. So I was shaking my fist at a Chicago Cubs fan at work. We're like, oh, it's like so bad. It's like, what? I wish here in Seattle we had the wonderful winning history of the Chicago Cubs, who have won. And I just looked it up. I knew 2016, but before that was 1907, 1908. I'm like, that's 3 wins. I want to get to the World Series once.
Yeah,
I want to get there and then maybe win at some point. So they're doing a thing here where because there's no game here in the stadium, but they're doing a $10 watch tickets where you can go sit in the stadium watching the big jumbotrons and enjoy the festive atmosphere with your fellow fans and everything. So very, very different. I seriously doubt that would be happening in Toronto if the game was being hosted in Seattle, because of the winning history that you've had more recently.
It's hard to say. There has been a real surge since we have had those playoff watch parties for the Raptors, the Jurassic Park, and we had that for the Maple Leafs playoff runs the last few years. Even though they haven't gotten out of the first round in over a decade, people still gather en masse and watch outside on the big screens and the whole thing, especially for the Raptors and for the Maple Leafs. It comes at the end of winter, right? It's sort of May. And then if they get a good run going, it's into June. So the weather's starting to get nicer and people want to get out, and that's kind of encouraged. I'll be curious. I don't know if there's anything, I must admit, I haven't looked to see if there's any kind of outdoor activity stuff around the Jays. I imagine there will probably be some watch spots, but because of the way the playoffs are now divided up starting this year, right? There's this wild card round, which is a best of 3. And then there would be the divisional round, which is the best of 5. And then there's the championship series, which is best of 7, and the World Series best of 7. I'll be curious to see if, obviously, it's a big if for your team, my team, and all the other teams that qualified for the playoffs. But I'll be curious to see if the momentum builds. I don't know. I mean, you said that there's been a lot of excitement in Seattle around the Mariners as they started, getting back into the playoffs after a long break. And that's, true of the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays missed out on making the playoffs on the last day of the season last year. So obviously disappointment there. But I'll be curious to see if there is that fever. When we made the AL Championship Series 2 years in a row last in 2016, things got pretty heated up. Like, my mom started talking to me about baseball, and my mom doesn't care about baseball, but she listens to the CBC a lot and was suddenly talking to me about Edwin Encarnacion's, slugging percentage. And I was like, what is happening? So it'll be interesting to see if this team goes on a little run, if there is that momentum, or again, if they get wiped out in 2 straight games by the Mariners, who nobody will be like, cool, I guess it's hockey season or basketball season starting.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting one here for that. It's been long enough in the Mariners that there's a Vladimir Guerrero, 5th of his name lineage, it seems, that has been the bane of the Mariners. But I'm guessing the Robbie Ray connection might be a key storyline if I was an announcer, regardless of what ends up happening there.
It's such a strange one too, because he came to us as a mercenary, right? He wanted to take a one and done contract to try and rejuvenate his career and cash in, and it paid off perfectly for him and to an extent for the Blue Jays. He was, so good that he ended up winning the Cy Young last year with the Jays. But as much as we enjoyed having him here, he was here for a year. Like, it wasn't like he was our guy. It wasn't like it wasn't like Roy Halladay, where like we brought him from drafted him, brought him up, ups and downs, the whole thing. And then he left us. Oh my God, what a betrayal. It was just like, well, we signed the guy as a one and done. Yeah, it's disappointing he didn't sign here, but in his place, we signed Kevin Gossman with the money we were going to sign him. And I got to be honest, if I had to side them side by side this year, it's kind of a wash. Kevin Gossman's been great. So I don't know. To me, I don't know if there's, maybe for more diehard Blue Jays fan, again, I've slipped into being more of a casual fan over the last few years just because baseball's kind of, lost a little bit of its luster for my taste. But I do think that it's not Roger Clemens leaving the Red Sox for the Yankees, or, you know what I mean? Like, it's there's no like bad blood. It's like, yeah, it's disappointing he chose someone else, but like, of course that can happen, right? And it wasn't like, we had a great year with him. It was a magical year, but it happens. It's business.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
But I'll be curious. Again, it seems like the matchups, the pitching matchups are really good. And it seems like, the two teams are sort of, stack up nicely. Although I was surprised to see, I didn't even know. I looked at the head-to-head record, and the Mariners kicked the pants off the Blue Jays this year. So I'll be curious to see how this plays out. Again, 3-game series is over fast, right? One bad mistake in the outfield, one, hanging curveball, and everything changes, right?
Yeah. Playoff baseball is so different than regular season baseball that, on paper, the Blue Jays should win because they're, when you stack up by position and everything, they're generally better than the Mariners. But the analysis I saw was like, well, so for pitching wise, the Blue Jays should be better if you're sticking to the starters. But if things go sideways, the Mariners have better depth. So that's a like, don't want it to get to 3. And, oh, by the way, we had to get, deep into the pen kind of thing. So that's obviously what the Mariners should be doing, of like, sit there, take pitches, tear up their arms, force them to go into their depth so that you put them in a bad spot. So should be fun. I never, you never like to say we're just glad to be here, but boy, are we glad to be here. And all the sports writers are like, every year I just got used to like, pre-typing out, and here's how the Mariners fell short. And it's like, well, they didn't. They made it. They made it to the playoffs. So there is no short at the end of the final game of the season.
Yep. No, but and they're on the right side of the bracket too. Whoever wins this series plays the Astros. The Astros had a great record, but they feasted on some terrible Rangers and Angels and Oakland A's teams. I don't think they're as good as they They appear to be. I think they kind of got a lucky break here. I'd rather play them over the Yankees any day of the week. So, the path for whoever wins this series to come out and end up in the ALCS is pretty good. So, yeah, I think it'll be a real slugfest. I'm looking forward to it. Early games for you though. I noticed that they're starting, like, a couple of the games are like 11 o'clock PDT times, right?
It's nuts. It's from like 9 a.m. Pacific to like 5 p.m. Pacific for all. I didn't realize all of the games were happening tomorrow. I just assumed you would logically split that, between Friday and Saturday. But it said nope. It is a like 24 hours of baseball. Yeah.
Yeah, they're doing quadruple headers. They anticipate about 14 hours a day every day for the next 3 days. And the Jays Mariners are they're the second game every day. So yeah,
a lot of shifts at the sports bars for all of those fans who are like hardcore dedicated to like, I'm gonna watch the very first game, and then the games overlap too. Like unless you have a really speedy 2-hour game somewhere, you are absolutely gonna have the bar with like the tail end of one game and the very beginnings of another game. So.
Yeah, well, we'll hope that Castillo and Manoah go crazy and just, it's a really close, quick game tomorrow.
Just a really quick 27 up, 27 down kind of game, right?
That's right. Double no-hitter. That sounds like a good start to things. Yeah, it'll be interesting. Again, there's a lot of talent on both sides of the field, so it'll be interesting to see what the breaks are, what the differences are, At stake, Jaime's face-to-face with Lexador.
I mean, I checked. I don't think she's on Cameo. I was like searching. I was like, I don't think she's on there unless I'm like doing this wrong somehow.
Yeah, I'll have to take a look. Like I say, I did a quick look under Star Trek, and there's a decent number of people on there, but I was like, Doug Jones or Tawny Newsome? Who would you rather talk to or get a message from? I'm like, tough call. You just get Tawny Newsome to do the whole thing as Mariner.
Yeah, that's a good one right there. Yeah,
addressing it to Boyd JPK, bold JPK or bold Jaime.
Yeah. All right. On that happy note,
call it a night.
Call it a day.
Good plan. All right.
Good night, folks.
Talk to you next week. Good luck, Jaime.
Same to you.
Bye.
All right.
Good game.
Yeah.
All right.